Most premieres suffer from a major flaw that becomes controversial. From the fandom's point of view, the first two premieres suffered from pacing issues. The Crystal Empire had a heated argument over its villain, and Princess Twilight Sparkle has had a large amount of complaints over how the plot jumped everywhere. Now, personally, with the only exception of my arguments with Sombra, I didn't have that many issues. I didn't mind the pacing or how jumpy the plots were because I admired their themes. Return of Harmony I was on the fence of from its pacing, but the challenge that Twilight did have to face made up for it. With Season 5, we already have an exciting start by justifying all of these in its own premiere. The Cutie Map, written by Scott Sunneburn and a longtime writer, M.A. Larson. Nice seeing you back again. The episode begins with the main six gathering together at the newly grown castle from Twilight's kingdom. Unexpectedly, an overlaid map of Equestria is shown, giving them a location to explore by their cutie marks.
If this is Ponyville, why are our cutie marks over there?
I don't know, but it seems like the map wants us to find out. The tree, the chest, this castle, and now the map. How can we not follow it?
Upon arriving at the location they are assigned to, they discover a town where all the citizens with equal signs as cutie marks have disturbing grins that not even Pinkie Pie would approve of. And I don't blame her, especially considering that she's an expert on optimism. After meeting with the folks, we're introduced to the leader, Starlight Glimmer, who keeps the town intact with equalization, a mentality where there are no cutie marks and having everyone be on an equal level. Okay, it's communism. It's blatantly obvious, it hurts for me to hint that even further. Starlight introduces the main six to a cave where all the citizens have their cutie marks stored in a vault. Unexpectedly, the main six have their marks removed and put into a house being brainwashed. A concentration camp, practically. Sheesh. This, right off the bat, fixes a few problems I would have normally encountered. The pacing works better as the narrative is laid out evenly, making the flow of the story feel a lot more natural. Not every bit is explained, but it's done well enough to engage me, and give the simple details on the foreground. This is something that other premieres suffered from. The next is the theming. Holy crap, does this one dare to tackle on a subject? This episode talks about equality, and having an even ground with everyone is not always the best solution. The way it's presented is very unnerving and shows a psychological effect instead of shock value. The grins are an obvious start, but there's also the expressions and the pupils in their eyes.
We're happy to have any pony who wants to experience true friendship for the first time.
Gives me the creeps. It's a control of one's free will and restraints of what their feelings are to one another, and it's an overall mysterious, eerie sense that makes me want to leave the town immediately. Another theme that subtly brings up is addressed by the villain, Starlight Glimmer. Unlike other episodes that had a villain who was more than a pony, Starlight is an ordinary unicorn that has the advantage towards everyone's free will. She's a down-to-earth character that manages to connect with its audience and not play the same rules of villainy as before. In addition, one of the funniest yet clever ways of this character's appearance comes from Rainbow Dash. She expects a big monster as much as the audience does to come out as we remembered seeing in the other series, and when Starlight appears, it plays with the audience. This works because it shows how self-aware of what the viewers would have originally expected, and it teases them into being introduced to another type of villain. What she shows here is well convincing enough. Her motivations are built from ground up. She shows the main characters of the town and what they do. There's a few characters who are acting rebellious against her will, and when it strikes, her motives begin to show and becomes an utter threat. Another part of what makes Starlight an interesting character is that there is no backstory shared, rather it's hinted at what could be the reason of what she's doing. My major guess is that while developing her magic skills, she may have been treated as inferior and taken it hard. This happened to some people in their lives, and in short, made them more defensive according to what happens in the episode. However, that's only just a theory of mine, personally, and I'm sure that it won't live up to what I presume. There's more to explain, but I'll save it for later. Getting to the characters, Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy's portrayals took me by surprise. For the most part, Dash was a representation to the audience's reaction by shouting out what differences this premiere had, while the other characters are in character. But what took me by storm was with these two characters and how their personalities have been utilized. Pinkie Pie, for starters, was more suspicious than others by identifying with the grins that she wasn't fond of. She could have been portrayed as the usual oblivious goofy side like what happened in Princess Twilight Sparkle. Here, she's aware of something strange and gets even aggressive at one point on Fluttershy's case when she was dancing to the town's musical number. Oftentimes, Fluttershy was the most oblivious in this one because of how generous the citizens were. I was originally expecting not to like Fluttershy here because of part 1 due to its act. One of the major things I've noticed with Larson's writing was that he wasn't very good at handling Fluttershy. Case in point, Magic Duel, when she was chickening out on entering the Everfree Forest to reach Twilight while Ponyville was in utter peril by Trixie. However, in part 2, because she was the one who admired the town's generous behavior on the surface, she was used by the main six to escape from the house and investigate what she could figure out. Further in the narrative, Fluttershy calls out Starlight's blow by her equal cutie mark as the whole time it was a fake, and she attempted to gain higher power by other ponies by manipulating them.
No!
You lied to us!
So what? Everything else I said is true. The only way to be happy is if we're all equal.
Except for you.
Every pony has unique talents and gifts. And when we share them with each other, that's how we—
Quiet!
In a nutshell, she cracks down and we get a chase of retrieving the cutie marks. And it's also from here that the premiere did something else that was different. Instead of having the main six or Twilight take on the final conflict, they are supported by a group of minor characters who surprisingly took in the roles that are just as important. As I pointed out earlier, there were characters that were acting rebellious towards Twilight, and it's because they actually missed what the cutie mark was, and it's a pretty relatable level. The following characters are Party Favor, Double Diamond, Sugar Belle, and Night Glider. We don't see them too much, but some of them have become more interesting to know. Sugar Belle, for instance, is a baker, but she isn't as talented without her cutie mark. Double Diamond's moments come in after finding his skis he left behind when encountering Starlight. Night Glider is someone I don't have much to say other than it's possible that she's a really talented and strong flyer. And that sounds a little generic when you think about the many other characters who also had strength throughout the series. But the most memorable for me is Party Favor, who later in this episode is able to create anything with balloons. I don't want to assume that they'd make later appearances after this episode, but honestly, I would like to see them again. Concluding this review, there's a number of things to take into consideration. On the one hand, this premiere is the most consistent and well-paced compared to the others, and its story is simple enough to follow and involve drama at the right moment and not cram too much in to leave anything left out. It's something that stood differently among the others by taking place outside of Ponyville and given a different type of villain that delivered just as well. However, as I would rank this as my personal favorite premiere of the series so far, I place this and Princess Twilight Sparkle as a personal tie. Why am I not surprised that everyone will get on my case about this? Admittedly, the episode's plot was too convoluted, but putting that aside, I love the flashbacks in the sisters' past and its overall theme about taking the title of being a princess, something that hasn't been touched upon that often for a show targeted for younger audiences. The Cutie Map, on the other hand, had a deep theme as well. However, the structure is what makes this premiere objectively better, but I have a personal connection with the Season 4 premiere. Another note to add here is that there are some possibilities to predict the rest of the season according to Starlight's disappearance. My only guess is that she stayed for the season's finale according to what the other seasons established. At the same time, I would have expected this season to have a sense of adventure later down the line. However, because of my assumption with Season 4 as well as any other moment of what I thought would have been built to any expectations for, I'm not willing to bet on them. I've been informed that the show is meant to be more slice of life based, and if that's what the show's meant to be, then so be it. But if the episodes do give more world building, then so be it as well. If Starlight's character does get fleshed out, again, then so be it. The only thing I can do is judge the series for what it is and not what it should be. God forbid I stumble upon another Equestria Games fiasco. So what will Season 5 bring and establish? What more will happen later on? Until then, I'm GoldenFox, and I'll see you next time.
We'll make this place feel cozier than hot cider on a rainy day.
There's gonna be cider?
They're never gonna let that joke go, are they? Third episodes of a season have made a setup or a format. It's a bit of a hit and miss in and of itself, but even when it becomes a miss, it doesn't bug me that much. The first season had the Ticketmaster, which set up the character motivations from the Grand Gala and the Gala. While establishing that, Applejack's reasons for going to the Gala was the most legit, and thus making the rest of the episode too uneven. Lesson 0 in Season 2, on the other hand, opened itself up to develop other characters more and have their own episodes and what they learn. Season 3's Too Many Pinkie Pies didn't really add anything other than me a copy and paste of Sending the Clones from The Simpsons. Nonetheless, it was still a fun episode. Castlemania in Season 4 introduced the journal that played in the show's role in morality and becoming a plot device for Twilight's kingdom. So what's in store for Season 5? Well, after a great premiere that broke the mold, we pick up a portion of what happened back in Twilight's kingdom, Castle Sweet Castle. The episode is written by two new writers, Joanna Lewis and Christine Sonko. In this episode, Twilight's uncomfortable living in the castle as she's homesick due to the loss of the Golden Oaks Library. She milked in whatever time she could invest with her friends, and they quickly pick up on Twilight during breakfast.
Oh, has it been that obvious? The thing is, I know it's silly, but I've been avoiding this place. The castle is amazing, but it doesn't feel like home. It's just so daunting. Look how big it is. I don't even know where to start.
Suggested by Rarity, Twilight goes to the spa and then run a few errands while her friends volunteer to decorate and reshape the castle. The main six, however, bring their own materials, which predictably becomes unrelated to what Twilight is known for. What follows in the rest of the episode is how the main six argue and debate over what should be kept to make the right decorations for Twilight's castle. At the same time, Spike has to keep Twilight occupied until the castle is ready. There's a few things I can appreciate for the plot. It keeps itself aware of whatever annoying formulas can be prevented, and doing so in a timely manner. At one point, the castle meeting room is a cluttered mess by everything every pony brought. No one says anything negative until Spike returns and sees everything. Being blunt as usual, Spike implies how bad the place is, which prevented what could have been another liar story where no one wants to be honest about their messy castle decorations. At the same time, when the characters argue about the castle and what they want kept, they pitch in and situate the matter instead of being an episode-long argument where nothing is done and Twilight returns disappointed and must elaborate what she likes in contrast to theirs. It's also worth mentioning that we do have a musical number, Make This Castle a Home. It has a nice upbeat sound that reminds me of Art of the Dress. This is partially because it has the same tempo and the same key, being E-flat major. But the lyrics are a bit off-putting as Dash's lyrics are dragged on. There's nothing wrong with having a long note from a single lyric, but it's also a bit delicate on how it works. In this case, it doesn't deliver as much. It isn't a bad song, but it's not one of the best. It does what it needs to do to get the story going. The episode carries several highlights throughout the episode. During Twilight's time with Fluttershy and the animals, she kicked Angel Bunny in a puddle of mud to expand her time. As much as I can't stand character torment, I just get a chuckle of how much Angel suffers from, given how much of a dick he was. In fact, he was still a dick as Twilight left and Fluttershy got locked out. I know it's wrong to think that two wrongs don't make a right, but even given how much garbage Angel is given, it's one of the few occasions where karma is played right. Do I expect this later on? Not really. Another highlight is when the characters are having pancakes for breakfast. This has been an online meme for quite some time, and in a later episode, there's another set of pancakes. Something tells me that the staff is catching up on what the fandom's been doing, which means, oh no, the yes pancakes are coming back. KP, Ink Rose, you win this round for now. So far, that's only a silly theory, but you never know since they occasionally like using a fan-favorite background character. Spike's moments have a bit of a hit and miss to me. He does everything he can to keep Twilight occupied until the end of the episode, and most of it is played out decently. Also, I gotta love Twilight's hairstyle in that short period. It's already gained an online meme as well. Too bad it was only a short time we saw that hairdo. It looks great.
Yeah!
High bulk biceps. Sadly, there's a bit of character torment that happens to Spike. I know the season's a bit early, but I get stingy on what happens to Spike after all the garbage he's been through in Season 4. Yeah, he did get 2 episodes in a row at the end of the season, even though I didn't like equestrian games, but I wouldn't assume he'll get treated better afterwards. Now, I did watch Silver Quill's video on Inspiration Manifestation where the writers have said that there wasn't room for Spike. Personally, I think there is room for what there is for his character. I'm not going to go into detail now, but I will say that both Silver and Dr. Wolf had their discussion about Spike in their own video. Yes, I just advertised another video. That won't be the last time I'll do it. But on the good side, what goes on with Spike, we see how much of an impact he has with Twilight about the Golden Oaks Library. It adds more weight to him rather than playing him off as a joke. I like that. This finally leads to the ending of the episode, and that's when the main six find out a solution on decorating the castle. They dug up a root of the library and made a chandelier out of them with little gems that resemble past times of Twilight's experience. In addition, the rest of the characters mentioned that they added their own touches to each room of the castle that was better fitting than cramming all of them in one room.
I couldn't help myself. It was just begging for the personal touch.
Truth be told, I couldn't either. Your kitchen might have some rustic farm decor, Twilight.
And there may or may not be some daring do posters up in your library.
And some stuffed animals in your bedroom.
What was that?
One of Pinkie Pie's confetti cannons.
What? It's not my fault I hid them so well.
This all adds nicely to the touches that remind her of her good friends in the castle. That ends the episode on a very good note. Remember the good times is something worth treasuring about, but also make new memories. On a whole, this episode was okay. There's a lot of things that could have made the episode worse, but I'm glad it was self-aware. It has its touching moments, the comedy worked most of the time, and the many memes the episode has given makes it worthwhile to appeal to the older demographic. To these two writers, not bad. Best of luck to you two whenever you get to another episode. Until next time, this is GoldenFox, and I'll catch you all later. Okay, I'm a little hyped up right now, so please excuse me as I blurt out my original 2 bits on this episode, Bloom and Gloom, for a moment. Oh my god, this episode was so awesome. It's another one of those Crusader episodes with Princess Luna involved, but it's Apple Bloom, and it's all this inception of layers of dreams, and just getting involved with Cutie Mark to just, the dream sequences are legitimately freaky and psychological. It takes you by surprise, and holy shit, Luna found the rift! All the Crusaders are together in this clubhouse, but it's a dream clubhouse, and Scootaloo can fly! Diamond, eat your heart out, you soulless piece of shit! So it's all a trilogy of the Crusaders' interactions with Luna, with all their internal conflicts that have been facing through the entire series, and the rest of the developments are progressed. It's brilliant! Fucking brilliant! It's amazing! As you already have guessed, I am deeply in love with this episode. It's a new extension for the CMC, further character development for Apple Bloom, and what potential may come next for all of them in the series. It's possible it may have been breaking that annoying trend where the CMC would assume that their current situations of getting their cutie marks. If that norm is broken, then I have to give credit to who actually wrote this episode. Yeah, very funny. I'm sure it was Larson, Amy Keating Rogers, or Megan McCarthy. You're shitting me, right? Josh Haber, writer of some of the blandest formulated episodes of Season 4, wrote Bloom and Gloom? Damn, he stepped up a notch. I don't know about you, but I think this season's getting better and better. Oh, it's a little early to say that. I hope I don't jinx it. Anyway, this episode begins when Apple Bloom calls her friends to the treehouse and informs them that her cousin Babseed has gotten her cutie mark. However, as excited as they are for her, they also worry if she'll still run her clubhouse in Manhattan or be a member at all, as well as whether or not she'd be satisfied with it.
If she spends all her time cutting hair, who's gonna run the Manhattan CMCs? Well, not Babs. She can't be a cutie mark crusader if she's already got her cutie mark. Oh, wow. I guess you're right. I'm glad she's happy, but I sure wouldn't want to be up to my flanking mane hair all day. Can you imagine getting stuck with a cutie mark you didn't like?
This right off the bat questions the possible outcomes of what one must do when their main goal of the series is accomplished. Back when I made a video about the show upon my confessions, I briefly stated a few things about the cutie mark plot device and how it was put to good use to teach young viewers about the values of what you find in your future. Here, it talks about how making a final decision without careful thought is repercussive. Realistically, the decisions of what a kid wants to be when growing up is more overwhelming than you think. One day they'd want to be an astronaut, but then a few years later they pique their interest and wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, an archaeologist, paleontologist, or whatever career they want to face. With all that said, this overwhelms Apple Bloom. With the thought of how long she's been wanting a cutie mark now isn't a simple wait anymore. Rather, a scary conflict of what her cutie mark will come at the cost of.
Alright, that's enough, Sugar Cube. Those are way too many questions to answer all in one night.
But
And no pony's gonna make you move out.
are you sure, Applejack?
Of course I'm sure. Now get some sleep.
As Apple Bloom dreams, she faces through these thoughts that she had feared. How it would come at the cost of her desires of what her cutie mark presents, the cost of her friends, and the cost of her family. Periodically, she encounters a voice in the middle of what looks like the Everfree Forest, but it's a never-ending wilderness.
Why would I want you to torment me with nightmares?
You didn't want to catch bugs and I helped. You didn't want to lose friends and I helped. If there's a problem with your family, I'm sure I can help with that too.
I don't want your help!
The shock value behind it is somewhat psychological, or more on the lines of A Nightmare on Elm Street, where what's used here is done through the mild sense of surrealism, and every sequence Apple Bloom reaches becomes more and more intense. I'm guessing this effect is becoming a new theme for the season. Not sure yet. It starts out like an ordinary day, and then it becomes a bit more depressing every step of the way. Some moments have a big highlight, most notably Big Mac, as he has more lines instead of yep or nope. Finally, Big Mac can say more lines. Eventually, Luna arrives to put an end to this madness as she reveals to Apple Bloom that all of this conflict was inflicted by herself in fear.
It's just me? You mean I've been doing all this to myself?
Of course, Apple Bloom. It's your dream.
If I've been dreaming this whole time, why don't I just wake up?
Sometimes we can worry about a thing so much the fear can make us feel like we're trapped in a nightmare.
Unless you're a lucid dreamer, you don't know you're in a dream while sleeping. A lot of what you're experiencing is becoming more focused than consciously aware. There are times I wish I knew what was going on whenever I had nightmares as a kid, but that happens. Another following line implies that a cutie mark is who you are. It's a bit weird putting this out there, but it makes sense. Rarity's a seamstress, but her cutie mark is a trio of diamonds, as she's good at finding any gems on the ground. Applejack's cutie mark is a trio of apples, but that's a part of the apple bloodline. Each of the members have an apple of some sort, and so to speak, they have passionate ways of providing what apples they can offer. It's who they are. Anyway, thinking she's alone in the conflict about her cutie mark, Luna reveals to Apple Bloom's friends that they are facing similar circumstances in their own nightmares, and they are all brought forth to a dream clubhouse where Scootaloo can fly. This is adorable beyond belief, though the question I ask is why couldn't she develop that thought in Sleepless in Ponyville? I guess it wasn't brought to question until Flight to the Finish, so I guess that's beyond something to ask. As they're all gathered together, they talk about Bab's seed, and for whatever possible worry she might be in, they're willing to offer support despite that she got her cutie mark. So that concludes the trilogy of the CMC and their dream interactions with Luna. Potentially they might have more of this dream clubhouse, but as much as I'd want to see that happen later on, I should not assume so. As it is, it's nice to add that they're all friends and are willing to stick together no matter what. And it's interesting to see how far the CMC has gone at this point. It's also worth mentioning that there are a few bits that give a nice touch and feel to the episode, such as Applejack's lullaby, which in my opinion is sweet and feels like a real lullaby. The dream visuals are not as openly aesthetic as Sleepless in Ponyville is, or For Whom the Sweetie Belle Toils, but it's also different enough for me to appreciate on what the writers and animators are willing to do. Out of all of Josh Haber's episodes, this one to me is his best. It's touching, suspenseful, and it's a great end to this little trilogy. What remains is what else will happen later on with the CMC. Are they going to focus on what they like doing? Or will it all stem back to that moronic trope where they assume that through another activity they'll get a cutie mark off of? Only time will tell. Until then, this is GoldenFox, and I'll catch you all later.
Prepare yourselves, every pony! Winter is coming!
Okay, for curiosity's sake, what is everyone's issue about Twilight implying that winter is coming? I don't watch Game of Thrones. Really? You're gonna tease me like that? Why am I not surprised that I'll be getting comments like these in the future? Okay, first thing, welcome back, Cindy Morrow. Nice seeing you on the show again. Secondly, there's been a bit of an obstacle about something I was under the pressure of. One of the following issues I had within the show was whenever a character makes another character cry or antagonize them, not just for comedic reasoning, but in general. I said more than enough about Pinky's insensitivity towards Fluttershy and Philly Vanilli, and there's already a controversial moment that happened in Putting Your Hoof Down. Even though I don't have as much of an issue with that episode, I am with Mr. Enter on that. The reason being is because it goes against the show's welcoming atmosphere that's been carried throughout the show by making the characters unlikable by their actions. There have been moments that fail to carry that welcoming feel in many other ways, but this one to me has been the most crucial over the years. With this mention, what does this have to do with the episode Tanks for the Memories? Well, I prepared this in advance so that I can talk about what I'm challenged with more down the line. Another thing I want to say is, I love this episode. It's already become one of my favorite episodes this season. but it took some time for me to appreciate it because of what I felt in that later half. And having acknowledged that and what the intentions are pays off the episode rather well. We start off with Winter arriving as Dash is spending time with her pet Tank. While daydreaming the many fun times that she'll be having with him over winter, she finds out that he's preparing to hibernate. This doesn't please Dash at all since it takes away all of what she had a lot to look forward to with him. From the start, I just love the fact that the writers finally gave some screen time with Tank. The last episode I saw was just for sidekicks, an episode I'd rather not talk about. One of the other following things worth mentioning is how this episode gives a nice callback to Season 1. Winter wrap up and fall weather friends. Also, Cloudsdale can move. That's something I don't see very often. In fact, watching how the weather has worked is something I haven't seen in a long time. I can see snow clouds being carried and brought to Ponyville. Such world building for the win. And funny enough, unicorns are using their magic to help Winter. Well, so much for that whole traditional excuse that the episode Winter Wrap-Up had 4 seasons ago. Dash later tries to get Tank to be more active, and thus she stumbles upon her friends who are all telling Dash once again that she's preparing to hibernate. When attempting to level with her, Dash gets pissed off.
Who said anything about anger? I didn't say anything about anger. I'm not upset, and I am not angry. Do I look angry?
And another new meme is born. Frustrated, Dash takes Tank home and thinks things over. She then has an idea. Dash decides that in order to keep Tank, she has to keep him warm in weather. In doing so, she goes to do something inhumane. Sabotage Winter. In addition, we get a song about Dash's passion for Tank. I'll Fly. I'm going to be honest and say that I wasn't too big on the songs this season. In Our Town did what it needed to do and what it was going for with the village, but the song was just mildly amusing to me. Make This Castle a Home was just okay, Applejack's Lullaby sounds nice, and I don't know if that would count as an actual song or not. All that said, I'll Fly is so far my favorite song this season. It's catchy, full of energy and emotion. The only downside are the lyrics, which gives a bad message. Arguably though, that's the point considering that it's what helps the narrative. Still, the song got stuck in my head for a while now. However, as Dash tries to take away Winter, more snow and clouds are made. So she then decides to take it out on the factory in Cloudsdale. Of course, things easily backfire. I've heard some complaints that Dash was never punished when attempting to damage the factory. To some level, I can agree, but it doesn't bother me that much, and here's why. Unlike Diamond Tiara, who got off scot-free when tormenting a disabled child for her own good, Dash is desperate on behalf of her pet. She's dealing with having Tank be away for an unknown period of time. In a way, it's grief. It's a difficult situation that she's never encountered before, and she's refusing to face it because it shows how much she cares for him. There may not have been much screen time with Tank throughout the entire series, but in the back of our minds, we love our pets. That alone connects. Still, it doesn't excuse what Dash's intentions are, but then I found it understandable on a high level. And on top of that, her silly mishaps backfire, and in one blow from the factory to Ponyville, Winter is finished. And there's once again karma done better. With no other options left, Dash lays with Tank on her bed at home feeling downhearted. The main 6 pay a visit to comfort her, and nothing works. That is until Fluttershy steps in.
Rainbow Dash, your winter is going to be petless.
And this roots back to what I stated early on in the review. In a Skype call with Keyframe, Eliora, and a few others, I was in a heated discussion about Fluttershy's actions. In a nutshell, I unleashed everything I could argue against on a moral level to the point where I finally gave in. And I did this on purpose because I heard other reviewers appreciated what Fluttershy did, and I was getting desperate to be convinced. In case you haven't noticed about my past experiences, I intend to learn things the hard way by this very sense of desperation. But instead of committing a moronic act in public, I did this privately. And here's where it pays off. Out of all the scenes where characters made others cry, Fluttershy was in the right on this occasion.
Whatever did you do that for? Because she'll never get past this until she lets it all out.
Throughout the episode, Dash completely brought this mess all on herself. She refused to believe by what her friends told her in a very disrespectful manner and attempted to sabotage a factory that was for the good of Equestria's environment. They tried to be nice to her and it didn't work, so there was no other options left. As other reviewers pointed out, this stems back to It Ain't Easy Being Breezy's when Fluttershy had to step in her role, where you sometimes have to take assertiveness to your own hooves. And trust me when I say that it's really hard for me to admit that overall. and in doing so, it put more weight on my feeling on the episode. At the moment where Dash was in tears, I felt like joining that group hug the main six were doing. As I said before, I appreciate Cindy Morrow's work throughout the level of emotions that she executes very well on. In Season 2, she stole the show with Sister of Social and Hurricane Fluttershy being my favorite episode to this day. Now, this moment does get a little silly at times, such as when Pinkie addresses Applejack crying from the inside and so on. But on a general whole of the scene, I find the emotional level done very well. Thus, Dash accepts what Tank has to do, and the final scene embraces with no moment to spare. And this is why it's one of my favorite episodes. Its humor is spot on, the callbacks are a nice touch, the song is awesome, and it overall is an episode that is well in depth upon speculating. This is an episode that managed to tackle on grief, but it plays its theme down several notches by not having any character getting killed off. Back when I reviewed Apple Family Reunion, I talked about Applejack's parents never getting mentioned. I was informed afterwards that Hasbro wouldn't allow it as it was death that was being played in, and it was too much for a child to take in, so to speak. Here, what the staff did was very risky, but it overall pays off what they were able to articulate and work around Hasbro's practices. Season 5 so far is on fire. I can't see how this could go wrong. Oh yeah, that's going to be an episode that won't be pretty to talk about. Until then, I'm GoldenFox, and I'll see you all next time. So you didn't like this episode either, huh? I can't blame you. A story overdone? That's just the beginning. There's more I have to say on behalf of this, but the issue of me reviewing this episode is that for the longest time, I've been too harsh on episodes I didn't like last season. Many people don't like it when reviewers are negative. I love what Season 5 is offering, and I don't want to risk making that same mistake like I did last season. The only human nature here, though, is to be honest about everything. We can at least provide more credibility, as there's a pretty decent amount.
True, even if we're both on the dislikes of this episode, we can go over it together.
It won't be easy, but it's worth a shot. Greetings to you all, I am GoldenFox.
Now I'm the voice of reason, as we bring you... Appaloosa's Most Wanted.
Let me first say that right now, I am not implying that this episode is completely bad. It has a pretty number of problems that outweigh the positives, but I can take the initiative of what the episode was trying to do. As it is, this episode has received a bit of a bad reputation, but I'll tell you this much, it sure isn't Some Pony to Watch Over Me or Rainbow Falls.
Oh, no, not towards today's episode. It was meh. Although Rainbow Falls may be my new Berserk button. Anyway, we start off in Appaloosa, as Applejack is taking over Braybird's spot of a rodeo competition due to his broken leg. While doing so, Braybird volunteers to babysit the CMC.
And the Cutie Map Crusaders are excited about the events, like...
barrel racing, roping contests, rodeo clowning, steeplechase. If we can get into some of these events, we can all three walk off the train back in Ponyville with brand spanking new cutie marks.
Guys, did you completely forget what Luna told you 2 episodes ago? A cutie mark is who you are. Does this look like you're the kind of ponies to get these marks from? Let me say this right now. Apple Bloom, you can make potions and possibly build things. Sweetie Belle, you can sing. Scootaloo, what is your name again? What is it with the writers making these characters so oblivious to their identities? Do they honestly think that kids are stupid? Not even 1 minute in, and I'm already frustrated. God damn it, I'm at a bad start now.
It's okay, Fox. We forgive you. Anyways, Applejack is taking care of the rodeo, an accident happens, but thankfully everyone is safe. The sheriff warns everyone that a wanted outlaw is on the loose, and is infamous for trashing rodeo events. He goes by the name Troubleshoes, who will be later introduced in the episode. So for the safety, Braybird volunteers to babysit the CMC. Again. Because him losing the CMC the first time, it's an indication that he's trustworthy. Then again, no other close relative isn't competing, so AJ's left with little options. So they're stuck with Braybird.
Yeah, because winning a stupid competition is more important than the safety of 3 kids. So after Brayburn locks the door and then passes out overnight, the CMC sneak out and attempt to find Troubleshoe's hideout so that they can get to compete.
Worst idea ever.
Okay, when the queen of bad ideas is telling you this is a bad idea, I'd be inclined to listen.
Unfortunately, almost no one is inclined to listen in this episode. They eventually find Troubleshoes, who lives in a broken trailer, and it's from here on it's a misunderstanding story. While most people think of him as a criminal, he's actually a klutz.
Of course, guests would arrive while I ain't got no pie to offer.
You know what? Screw it. I'm calling you Eeyore for the rest of the review.
Thus, this brings what I actually liked in the episode. The characterization of Troubleshoes is quite depressing when you think about it. As it shows, he's dealt with some of the most rotten luck in his life when he never asked for it. It's what led up to the current turmoil that he can't get himself out of, and it just makes me feel bad for him. There have been situations that some people have gotten into that question themselves about who they are, and what they struggle to learn about. So to the CMC's credit, they do manage to find a solution to the problem rather than assume his character as an outlaw. This is what's labeled him as such by the town, which unfortunately adds fuel to my fire of what aggravates me the most in this episode. The adult characters.
Can I just say, the adults are useless trope needs to die. The adults are so stupid in this episode that they act like 90s kids movie adults, such as Brayburn, Equestria's worst babysitter, or Sheriff Silverstar, Equestria's worst law enforcer. Which leads to yet another don't judge a book by its cover story. You know, I wouldn't mind so much if this wasn't the third time the show pulled this story off! Bridal gossip, Luna eclipsed, and now here! The CMC failed to communicate to the adults when they have the chance to bail out Eeyore for his clearly not wrongdoings, something that the show has had multiple problems with in the past.
Troubleshoes has, well, trouble seeing the events outside of the prison window because of all the mattresses breaking.
Oh, come on now, Troubleshoes. I'm running out of mattresses.
Hey Sheriff, here's an idea. Why don't you get him a stool instead? Doesn't it ever occur to you that he's trying to watch something? Why don't you even have a chat with him and understand the entire situation, provided how depressed he looks? And here I go again, acting ruthless. Get it together. I hope I don't act like this in the rest of Season 5.
The CMC find out another way to help Eeyore's purpose of his cutie mark after a successful jailbreak. See, his motivation was that he wanted to be a part of the rodeo events. He never specified what he wanted, so he tried different kinds of stunts. With one exception, playing as a rodeo clown. He does so, and he succeeds at his performance, while unfortunately blowing his own cover. However, the CMC reasoned with the audience and come to a good closure after finally listening.
Thus, this brings the closure of Troubleshoe's turmoil.
That may be so, Troubleshoes, but you still gotta face charges for the problems you caused.
Oh, lay off, will you? It's not completely his fault for his identity crisis. In fact, you guys were the ones that labeled him as a criminal in the first place. You know what? That's it. I can't take it anymore. I know my attitude was vicious last season, but I think it's time I vent and let this out.
Well, I better go get the water bucket.
These adults in this episode are some of the most despicably betrayed characters in the entire series. While not as brutal as Diamond Tiara's actions, when you narrow down the entire turmoil of Troubleshoes, he's labeled as an outlaw for ruining rodeo events by accident year after year. Oh no, it's the end of the world. Someone call the ambulance. I mean, it's not like he robbed a saloon or committed murder or anything malicious in that matter. In fact, actual outlaws have shown their faces in very spaghetti westerns without remorse and acting very dominant. What did Troubleshoes do again? Oh yeah, cause an accident. If anything, the entire village put him in this position without a second thought. It only took until the CMC had to be active, and the fact that the CMC are being ignored about the situation just pisses me off. Such close-minded individuals who are morally irresponsible behind this mess. After everything is solved for Troubleshoes, the CMC admit their fault of being with Troubleshoes when he was accused of kidnapping, and then they are punished by making them clean up the mess, with what Applejack had to say.
You really want us to clean up all this mess Troubleshoes made?
Maybe it'll teach you not to go wandering off after I say not to.
Says the one who trusted her sister after nearly getting herself killed by a chimera over a fucking pie delivery. Not to mention how that fiasco started by her annoying presence. Thank you, voice. I needed that.
No problem. But continuing on the Applejack thing, her actions here were actually justified since there was a clear danger, as opposed to some point to watch over me where the danger was soup. So, want to talk more about the positive stuff?
Sure, let's. This episode, as I said, isn't completely bad. In fact, what helped this episode better was how Troubleshoe's conflict was resolved by the CMC. Based on what's happened, this is the identity issue that stems back to Bloom and Gloom when the CMC feared what their marks would be. if whether or not they'd be satisfied. It's a nice callback, even though it did come at the cost of the CMC's continuity of their own identity.
What's interesting about this ending moral is how mature it is. I mean this in two ways. First, the idea of misinterpreting your meaning in life is very realistic. Sometimes even to adulthood, people have no idea what their calling is. Hell, it took me 3 times to realize I actually have a creative side and wanted to pursue a career in television production. The second is the placement of the moral incongruence of the episode. It feels like the ending doesn't fit with what transpired beforehand. They could have easily gone with the traditional don't judge a book by its cover story, combined with a learn to get your facts straight moral. Again, we saw that twice beforehand. But instead, they took the high road and delivered a surprisingly adult message. Again, great ending, I just think it should have been at the end of a more engaging episode. Not gonna lie, this episode was the most difficult to muster up a review of. The story, while told competently, has been done plenty of times before, note for note. While some characters get some fun interactions, such as the CMC and Eeyore, for everybody else we get the adults are useless trope. It was a fairly standard episode, technically speaking, with a few exceptions. While the episode was funny in the first and third acts, the overall enjoyment of the episode hindered because of a tired cliche that needs to die. However, the moral has an interesting take on the ambiguous cutie mark and was executed okay. As a result, I give Appaloosa's Most Wanted a 2-star rating. While it's nowhere near as bad as any of my bottom 15, I just don't have any engagement towards the episode.
Now, as far as I'm concerned about what's formulated, what's been done before, and what's considered cliched and unoriginal, these complaints haven't bothered me as much over the years, because frankly, almost every story in the 21st century has had a formula of some kind. It just depends on how well handled it is and how it's presented. As predictable as one story can be, it's the journey that matters the most. But in the case of Appaloosa's Most Wanted, the journey was difficult. This episode was all over the place. It takes a little too long to get to the conflict, and some of the continuity on the characters were thrown away for the convenience of the episode's plot. And I mean that in a bad way. And the adult characters. God damn, were the adult characters so despicable. Brayburn was a moron, the crowd was so stupid to believe anything they say, and the sheriff? Oh, the sheriff was the worst. He was close-minded, accusative in the worst manner possible, and he had absolutely no remorse over anything. I haven't seen characters this mean that not even the complaints of the mysterious Mayor Duell would have. Just the idea that this turmoil of troubleshoots by an entire village's assumption was just mean-spirited. I'm also pretty ticked off by the fact that the continuity of the CMC was chucked out for the convenience of the plot. I know the consistency isn't the show's greatest strength, but the fact that Bloom and Gloom, a great episode, was heavily discarded not long after it aired just feels disrespectful to the audience. To its credibility, I am with Voice of Reason about Troubleshoes and its morality. You sometimes have to look at things from a different view to understand yourself. It's a good moral about finding the true element of yourself, include that with a bit of some funny slapstick, and I also would give this a 2 out of 4 stars, even though I don't normally give ratings.
But hey, if this is the worst Season 5 has to offer, especially with much more entertaining and engaging episodes down the road, I'm willing to take this small speed bump over the worst episodes of past seasons.
Yeah, in fact, I have another great episode to review next. Make new friends, but keep Discord.
So until the next episode, I'm the Voice of Reason.
And I'm GoldenFox, and let's hope that this season doesn't get another rainbow oh shit. Discord's episodes that were slice of life based and arc narrative based have been pretty divided. One being Keep Calm and Flutter On, where people were not very keen on Discord being reformed. Then there's There's a Crowd, which I found it to be a mindless yet okay episode. Finally, in Season 5, we have this episode, Make New Friends But Keep Discord, and with no contest, It's the best episode so far to feature Discord in a slice of life setting. There's more development for Discord as he's fleshed out more than his other moments in the series. This episode begins when Discord is having a tea party with Fluttershy. She mentions a friend she's made during her trip to see the Breezies, and her name is Treehugger. With little knowledge, Discord isn't very pleased about having another friend, thinking he's being overshadowed. To add insult to injury, Fluttershy is inviting her as a +1 to the gala when Discord originally expected to be invited from her.
I'm sorry, Discord. I assumed you'd have your own ticket since you and Princess Celestia are friends now.
Basically, this episode is another jealousy story, but unlike other episodes that had this formula, this one was done better than, let's say, All's Well That Ends Well, for a number of reasons. First off, Discord is new to the concept of friendship, and it's something to take the initiative of since prior to his other episodes he was only taking advantage of others for his own amusement. After Twilight's Kingdom, he's now taken into a different direction, and he is going to run into some obstacles. And since he's new to the concept of friendship, his reactions are more natural compared to Spike's behavior in All's Well That Ends Well, where he's already experienced friendship much more than Discord has. Discord is in a way an overgrown child, and he's downright upset that he isn't invited, and it doesn't help that his attitude gets in the way. In addition, we get a callback from the best night ever with the Grand Galloping Gala. It's a bit off topic to go over this, but when it came to the gala in Season 1, I was expecting the characters to have some kind of impact after seeing their expectations too high. Even after their talk about their experience at the donut joint, I found it weird that they'd still be excited about attending the gala after everything they experienced last time. My only guess is that they only know what to expect afterwards instead of thinking unrealistically. It's nevertheless a nice callback. We of course have Treehugger, who's introduced early on.
Radical to meet you. Really digging your vibe.
She seems to be the kind of pony I like to hang around with. You wouldn't say that to Keyframe for being a huge Beatles fan now, would you? I didn't think so. Even though she's labeled as a 60s hippie stereotype, she has a very likable personality by a calm attitude which counteracts with Discord's antics, thus putting him into very awkward situations which become hilarious in the long run. She's open-minded but not dumbed down like what most hippie stereotypes are portrayed as. This I'll say for later. With the +1s that's added for the gala, Discord goes to ask others for an open slot. However, Twilight's busy with the gala preparations, Rainbow, Rarity, and Applejack have their CMCs as +1s, and Pinkie Pie's bringing Maud as her +1. Frustrated, Discord storms on home, and it's here we see his living environment. Obviously it's bizarre, but much of that is to be expected. Given to Discord's character, it allows several creative merits to kick in, as well as a lot of jokes that are played throughout the episode. Anyway, it turns out that Discord's invitation to the gala was late on delivery since the mailman was lost in Discord's home. Makes sense. And to outshine Fluttershy and Treehugger throughout the episode, he brings his own +1. What the fuck is that? Sorry about that. This is the Smooze, a character from Generation 1 who was once a villain. Here though, he's a naive creature who consumes anything shiny to him. Some people didn't like the changes of his character, but I personally don't mind. Then again, I didn't grow up with the first generation, so I'm in no right position for the understanding. While attempting to get even with Fluttershy and Treehugger, things don't go as planned, and each moment that happens builds up more and more to Discord's frustrations. Now this is something I need to go over. I stated before that I hate cringe comedy, most of which is when a character embarrasses themselves in a predictable way that becomes difficult to watch. I mention this because some people find awkward humor to be a part of cringe comedy. Not necessarily. Cringe comedy is something that makes you want to cover your face and turn away from something because you know how bad it is. However, when it comes to awkward moments, there's a very unpredictable nature that follows. It connects with the audience because of not only what they've experienced in their lifetimes, but you never know what's going to be their final result in what you're watching. In this episode, the awkward moments in Discord are done flawlessly. You never know how Discord's going to react, whether it's a comeback or a feel of frustration. As a matter of fact, the humor is one of the two major points that makes this episode shine, the other being Discord's character. We have fourth wall jokes, references to Metal Gear Solid and The Shining, and the many comedians Discord references pulling off a stand-up comedy performance. This to me is the funniest part of the episode.
Knock, knock. You're supposed to say who's there! This is the most basic of jokes!
You're the most basic of jokes.
Ooh, Discord. You want some ice to go on that burn? Shut up! I wanted to reenact it too. You motherfucker! Now, as much as I enjoyed this episode, it isn't a perfect one. While it didn't have any feelings for the Smooze, it seemed Discord was a little too hard on him. Ideally, that's kind of the point given how desperate Discord is, but keep in mind, this is a character we're supposed to root for. It also doesn't help whenever Fluttershy is oblivious to what Discord is up to. I could guess that maybe she's having too much fun, but even with the amount of time she ignores Discord, it becomes a little too disorienting. To be fair, there have been moments in her obliviousness that was played for laughs.
We went to the store and got 2 cakes.
In addition to what makes Fluttershy's character stand out well comes the final act. After failing to upstage Treehugger, Discord attempts to send her into another dimension. Immediately, Fluttershy steps in and commits to something she's been doing throughout the season. As you may have noticed, Fluttershy has managed to stand up to a lot of things and be bolder than what she used to. It did seem a little strange for her progression, but it's nice to consider how far she's gone from the series, and this scene is easily no exception. Discord steps down and apologizes to Treehugger. She accepts his apology, but knowing it will take a little while before getting acquainted well. This roots back to when I was talking about our character being open-minded and not being dirt stupid. Back in Magic Duel, I criticized Trixie being forgiven so easily after all the chaos that she's caused in Ponyville. Case in point, with Treehugger, we see her forgive Discord for his actions, but it will take some time to get acquainted because of that. This is one of the following occasions where redemption scenes are done better. It will sometimes take time to get better connected from your past actions. In the end, despite that there are a few obvious flaws, this episode was a lot of fun with plenty of things to take into consideration. It opens Discord's character more, it justifies its simple jealousy story along with several jokes this episode had a lot of room for, and it embraces everything to keep the viewers entertained. Now this episode was written by Natasha Levenger, who also wrote It Ain't Easy Being Breezy's and Pinky Apple Pie. While I find this episode to be Discord's best so far in a slice of life category, I still rank Pinky Apple Pie at the top. But even then, that comes to show how much more potential this writer has. So until next time, this is GoldenFox, and take care. What the hell are you guys doing?
Oh, hey GoldenFox. We were just fan-squeeing over the 100th episode.
Oh. Oh my gosh, 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 oh my gosh. Okay, so now that that's out of our system, this episode was really quite something. For an episode that is the 100th, including the two-parters, I wasn't sure where the writers were going to go at this point, provided they did so much. So, for an episode to be centered on the background characters, it was a nice welcome, even though the fans are guilty of liking the fan pandering. And yes, it's flown with fan pandering. It's silly, all over the place, and I love it. It's also well aware of what the episode is doing, and in doing so, everything is embraced.
Another interesting aspect, and this is coming from me, being someone who doesn't usually pay that close attention to staff credits and who does what, is that Slice of Life also brings to focus some secondary tier staff, or at least some of those that we may not give as much thought to in relation to others. As big of a fan of Daniel Ingram and his work as I am, I have to admit, hearing William Anderson's music being brought to the foreground was a pleasant alteration to the norms we're used to.
When I heard that the 100th landmark episode was coming, I was so excited to get to see the background ponies making their chance to shine. As a student at the Digital Media University, I had a feeling that this episode would be full to the brim with fan service. As this 100th episode showed, now we loved the show for the past 5 years, and today it is still strong and amazing to be part of with us bronies here in the fandom. Fan service in media is okay in my book, as it gives the staff the chance to bring stuff to the table, as long as it doesn't take away from the overall story. However, a big landmark as this is worth celebrating about. Let's get this party started!
We start off with Cranky and Doodle, a couple we haven't seen in a while, as they prepare for a wedding. Originally they planned on having the wedding set for tomorrow, but the date was set to today instead. So in a clusterfuck, Matilda goes to gather many of the other characters to set up the wedding. And all of this was because of one character who misprinted the invitation.
Muffin? This is the first speaking role since the last roundup in Season 2, and we remember the controversy at that point about her voice being changed and stuff. But luckily, Tabitha St. Germain's voice at Derpy is being portrayed better along with her character. I'm loving this so far.
And iTunes, you better leave Derpy alone, or so Luna help me, you're going to regret it.
It's Muffins now, Goldie.
Wait, what?
Yeah, check the end credits. Her name is listed as Muffins.
But we can still call her Derpy in our fan works.
Either or. Because Muffins feels bad about the misprint, she wishes to go back in time. So she talks about this to Time Turner, actually. Let me check the credits again. Guys, you may want to be careful that BBC might sue you.
Something I want to talk about on this beloved wall-eyed mare. I absolutely adore the fact that they make her out to not be such a moron like the tightwad asses tried to say she was back in the last roundup. She's an entrepreneur, utilizing connections and resources in order to connect people, their ponies in this case, with needed services, like helping young artisans make connections with clientele in such a way that makes both parties happy. Exactly the way it should be. She's not stupid, she's not dumb, she's just a bit unfocused, much like a certain peak pony we've already been familiar with for years now. And speaking of the Doc, I loved his portrayal. My expectations for this episode were high in terms of really opening up opportunities for the writers and animators to express their own ideas for what these background characters are like. And while some of it is familiar to us as fans, there were also some interesting and new even welcome twists to some of the characters we've been falling in love with the past 5 years. There were so many references to Doctor Who with these two, not to mention the adorable shipping. OMG, they are just so adorable together. Look at them, so cute.
I know, right?
I, for one, don't watch Doctor Who that much. That being said, I enjoyed what the staff insisted on referencing him to, given how acknowledgeable they are to the fandom's interpretation of the character. Although him saying things like Great Wickering Stallions as if he's Doc Brown could get a little annoying after a while. In his subplot, he intends to get his suit tailored for the wedding, and the closest he can find is a group of bowlers from the Cutie Pox who reference the Great Lebowski. As a catch, he's to play and beat a game of bowling with them in order to get his suit tailored if the team wins. Unfortunately, while it is a nice callback, this part goes on for a little too long and it adds little to nothing. Why? Because later on in the episode, Doc leaves the game unfinished after Muffins, tells the Doc that she has flameless fireworks set up for the wedding, something she was addressed to earlier in his laboratory. This is because of how bad Muffins felt and what favors she could do in return to make up for it. This doesn't please Doc, provided how hazardous it might get. So what was the bowling game for again?
Well, plot-wise, the bowling game was against another team, but the team the Doc had met had their fourth missing. So they roped Doc into being their fourth in exchange for them tailoring his suit for the wedding. At least when he bails on them, we get to see the end of his bracket. He misses the spare, and it kinda pisses off the big one.
More like all of them. Outside of the bowling alley, we see several background ponies grouped together as they talk about the main six. Well, that's totally not stalking.
Maybe it's just a friendship problem, and it'll all be cleared up in a half an hour or so.
I hope so.
Well, we officially have our second tier Pinkie Pie. Where's the super glue again? We're gonna need it for the fourth wall breaks.
Okay, what the hell? That's an odd combination.
Half panda and half bee. A bugbear. I've heard of people throwing pandas at us, but this is ridiculous.
I like this angle. By giving the main six something to do during the episode, they're not just, not there. True to the episode's name, it's about the day-to-day life, with just a little bit of action and adventure mixed in. It's not the first time the main six have been pushed to the background either. After all, they let Rainbow Dash continue with her weather sabotage when we came back from commercial break during Tanks for the Memories. That was just where we got the Who's On First reference scene with clear and blue skies. In any case, looks like the main six will have their hooves full today with this... bugbear?
Did you say bugbear? It found me!
Ah, of course. Lyra and Bonbon, one of the most popular shippings in the fandom. I should add something about these two. The cleverest thing that I have to give credit to Emmy Larson on is that they made the scene very well aware of the Bonbon name. This is a step up from Rainbow Falls, where Bulk Biceps was given his name without any further notice to the fans, who referred to him as Snowflake. This was a disappointment for me as well as many others because of how blunt it was to the staff, without giving any further notice when the fandom called him Snowflake all these years. Here, the actual name for Bonbon is Sweetie Drops, but they actually acknowledge what the fandom has called Sweetie Drops by giving out the other name and playing it as a secret agent role on her. That is dedication.
It also gives an interesting excuse as to why we see Bonbon in, every group shot in this series, and I've heard some fans saying it explains why she has 1,000 different voices as well. She's multi-talented, much like a certain Pegasus I know.
Aw, thank you.
You're my very best friend.
Okay, I don't care what they call in the episode, that look, the way they hold each other in their hooves, those two are fucking.
So far, we've seen a majority of the background ponies get their fair share of screen time. There's a few minimal ones like Rose, Daisy, and Lily referencing Apocalypse Now, Steve and Magnet, and the Massagers, Aloe and Lotus.
As I expected, the 100th episode special was obviously a brilliant chance for the writers and animators to show us what their creative sides could do with these background characters we've been watching for years, and I wasn't disappointed in the least. From seeing the time scientist of the Doc and Derpy's delivering services, to the Flower Trio's dramatic reactions to, well, problems with their flowers at least, screw the Monster Ranch paintings through their hometown, and of course my favorite characterizations between two musically inclined ponies we all know and love. We've seen step after step of creative works from the show's writers and animators, showing us that what we see in the main six isn't exclusive to just a small cast, but can be done for any one of their characters they've created. It's this level of quality of writing that brought us all to the show in the first place, and at least is what continues to bring me back for more, with each and every new episode.
Speaking of two musical ponies, we now get to see Vinyl Scratch and Octavia.
This is my favorite part of the episode. It's a nice compare and contrast in their personalities within their passion of music. Octavia's orchestral style with the modern sounds of dubsteps with vinyl reflects very well on how everyone is willing to combine and make a new form themselves. The fandom has had an enormous growth of musicians, and it was fascinating to see on what the episode was willing to do. A major instance being One Last Letter, a combination of some metal from Bonafide and synthesized works of Aviators.
This is another great surprise and contrast to what the fandom knows about these two. Rather than struggling against each other, their personalities actually mesh really well, and they apparently even seem to jam together on a regular basis, since their exchanges are relatively wordless. The music, too, is an astonishing piece in and of itself, and is worthy of some of the best pieces that we've seen Daniel Ingram do in the series. William Anderson's hand puts the two styles of music together seamlessly, which I'm sure was no small feat. I can't wait to hear some more works done based off of this one, now that we have a canon mix between dubstep music and classical orchestral. And I also love the fact that they show Glaze using her turntable as basically another instrument.
I really love the scene from start to finish, not only from an animation point of view, but also from a musical perspective as well. This music reminds me from an instrumental piece called Variations, from the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical Song and Dance. This piece is both the use of classical music and modern music mashed together, with the awesome child stylings of Andrew Lloyd Webber's brother, Julian Lloyd Webber. This is featured in the second half with the cast creating their own dance styles, from ballet to hip-hop. After seeing what Vinyl Octavia did, I immediately recognized the musical style. The characterization of these two are really well done as well, and it gives them the motion of being roommates as seen from the design of their house, and also gives a nod to the fandom as well, as they portray them as roommates. And then the two ponies race across town on a DJ deck baseball-mobile, and we get to see some more familiar faces as they race to the wedding.
As if this episode wasn't ridiculous enough, I was laughing so hard at the scene.
That's one of the best parts of this episode. It is fully aware of just how ridiculous it is, and it embraces every aspect of it.
Wait. Rewind that bit and play the sequence again in slow motion. And freeze it. What the hell?
Okay, that was so hilarious.
Larson, you are such a troll.
Larson, you seriously can't get any more ridiculous, can you?
What is life? Is it nothing more than the endless search for a cutie mark? And what of the poor gator? Flank, forever blank, destined to an existential swim down the river of life to an unknowable destiny?
Okay, never mind, I asked. I'm gonna go get some coffee now.
So after that musical interlude, we finally arrive at the wedding, and we get to see Celestia and Luna acting like sisters instead of princesses, as they argue about who should bring the wedding presents. I wanted to see those signs of the royal sisters for a long time. I honestly want to see an episode like this in the future. But above all, this was a very good start. And we also get to see Cadence in Shining Armor too.
Oh look, here comes the main sit. And another cock tease. Seriously?
Well, they didn't even bother to knock.
Once all things settle inside, we get to hear a bit of a speech from Mayor Mare. And this is where things start to touch the heart. Her speech she gives about everyone telling their own story might have been touched on in other media before, but never to this level. Yes, we've gotten to see some fun action from the main characters of our story, but this whole episode has been about the other people in life, expanding on seeing the world as a whole, and even seeing the same thing from a new perspective. It really is everyone, not just close friends, but the people you might meet while shopping about that help to fill the rest of the corners of your life. And in turn, it's everyone, no matter how small a role they may think they have, that which is important in life. And as the saying goes, there's always a rest of the story.
When it comes to a story, background characters are just as important for a role because it adds life to an enriched environment. It provides more activity to invest the viewer and not just what the main characters are. You look at a downtown street, for instance, and there's only a few people in a situation. In that eye, everything that is presented feels too empty and shallow as the main characters that are only focused on underwhelms a viewer. With the crowd and other activities going around, it adds more to what the environment provides as we're given our attention to what the main characters are doing. Another analogy to put is that there are people behind a stage act as they provide whatever special special effects there are, as well as janitors who have to clean up after the act is over. They deserve as much respect as the performers do. This episode brings that analogy to life, which is why I didn't have that big of an issue on how fan-pandering it was.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. This has become one of my favorite moments out of the entire series. The mayor speaking to the wedding guests, it's actually speaking to all of us here who watch the show. It's true that we all play a huge part in all of our lives, through the good times and the bad times. We have ourselves, our families, and our friends to be part of that journey. If it weren't for us here in the fandom, the show wouldn't have reached this point, and this moment reflects this. If we can continue our support to the MLP staff for conventions and other things, they may have a chance to reach the 200th mark. If that happens, this show will make the history books.
In the end, there's a number of ways to look at this episode. Obviously, it's a silly and over-the-top episode with several background characters taking the limelight instead of the main characters. It was weird, it was zany, but I loved it. It's a nice contrast to the norm of the series, and it puts us in a different view than the same old. However, this episode in and of itself could have been tweaked better. The bowling scene was given too much space, and the focus can get a little too confusing from the main plot, being about cranking Matilda's preparation for the wedding. That's only a nitpick though. Would I recommend this episode to any newcomers? I personally wouldn't, since no one would get the idea on what the show is about. I'm also aware of how many people hated the episode for its fan pandering, as it's equivalent to waving keys in front of a child's face. And to some degree that is understandable. That said and done, despite on how ridiculous and stupid this episode is, I loved Slice of Life. It's filled with nice comebacks, the humor is well embraced, and it's an overall nice love letter to the fandom.
For me, this episode was fantastic. There were a few parts that were a bit confusing, but overall this was a fantastic and entertaining episode. This gave the background characters the chance to be in the spotlight with their amazing personalities, which will give the fandom some new food for thought for songs, fanfics, and fan art. Whilst the episode was full of fan service, and I agree that this was a real love letter to us here in the fandom, it didn't stir from the overall narrative. Another favorite episode from this season, and another episode from my top episodes in the entire series. The story, the music, the animation, the moral, and the humor was top notch as well. I give this episode a 9.5 out of 10 stars. Thanks, Emmy Larson.
While the episode is definitely for the fans and not for the general public, I'm definitely one of those that will accept this episode as what it is. As Goldie said, a love letter to the fans. And that's for all of us, from content creators like artists, musicians, and even reviewers, to those that wait up every Saturday morning for the latest episode with their kids. Slice of Life is a beautiful episode I think will be cherished by much of us for a long time to come. Story-wise, it keeps its head on straight, without taking itself seriously at all, while maybe it's the best way to look at our own slice of life as well. We got to see the new creative works of new characters and see to focus on the background musicians for the show, as well as some other voice actors, with lessons showing that everyone, no matter how small they may think they play in this world, is an important and vital part of the other's stories. There's just nothing for me to dislike about this work. Definitely one of the best of the series thus far, and hopefully only one of the great ones still to come this season and beyond.
So until next time, I'm GoldenFox.
Rose Pal.
And Postscript of the Bernie Crusaders, and we'll catch you all next time.
Well, it's really no surprise that this episode has received a lot of criticism over the course of many reviewers and actual viewers alike. To add insult to injury, it's written by a writer who has written for Johnny Test, a show in which I hear is so terrible, and yet I can't judge what I haven't seen. The other is the mentality of a Spike episode being bad because it's a Spike episode. Now, I'm not the one to judge on behalf of the bias of it being a Spike episode, but it almost feels that way considering that every Spike episode was heavily criticized for the same thing. I don't normally try to have that mentality because it's too absent-minded of me to do so. I otherwise wouldn't have said some positive things about Spike at your service. So with special guest Caps Lock, he has some insight to say.
My biggest problem with this episode has nothing to do with the episode itself. Rather, the reaction and all of the unjustified flack it got. Spike episodes are stigmatized in the community as inherently bad. People often complain about Spike episodes being repetitive, teaching the same lesson over and over again, which isn't the case. Spike does have similar issues in each episode, yes, but the entire idea behind Spike is experimenting in a trial and error process how to tackle these issues with his confidence and coping with pressure. It wasn't until Equestria Games that Spike got any real answer to his problems. They exposed the problem from several angles, and all he learned was what not to do when he had tried to solve those situations. And even if they were all the same, Equestria Games gave him the final answer he needed, and Princess Spike is a byproduct of that.
I will openly admit that I was also in this trap, but just because they were the same formulas doesn't mean the episodes lack any new ideas. They can be taken in many different angles. Perhaps the biggest example people complain about with Spike's confidence formula was with Power Ponies. But it wasn't because of the formula that was the problem, rather how shoehorned it felt, provided how many times Spike was complaining. The more he complained, the more the episode was telling the viewers how much of a confidence issue he had. After a while, it does get arguably annoying. However, Equestria Games did a better job by having Spike be proactive than complaining. Made a mistake and felt bad for it? Try to make up for the problem, which is what anyone would subconsciously do. Even if that means having cringe humor, but you at least see what I mean. Looking at his character as of now, let's have a closer look at Princess Spike. This episode starts off with ponies and even griffins all over Equestria gathered together in Canterlot for a summit, or a convention for a pony's perspective. We're given the opening ceremony from Twilight, Celestia, Luna, and Cadence as they provide their speeches. However, as Spike speaks in, well...
So if there's anything I can do for any of you...
We love you, Princess Twilight! We love all the princesses!
Yeah, that was pretty rude. So much for Spike's credibility of saving the Crystal Empire twice, assholes. Anyway, because Twilight hasn't had that much sleep over the past 3 days getting the summit prepared, Spike is assigned to keep on guard for her as she's resting for the time being. However, as he does what he can at first to keep things quiet, matters start to get overwhelming as 2 delegates arrive as they're fighting over a conference room that they were booked in for the same room.
I had the room first, and let's be honest, my speech is more important.
Point of order there, sir, but I think you'll find that my speech is the more important one, don't you know?
They want Twilight's decision of who goes to make their speeches on their academy, and in short time too. However, because Twilight can't answer clearly after waking up, Spike has no other option but to decide himself. From here on, he successfully controls the crowd as he gets carried away by abusing his authority power for his own spoils. Thus, this becomes a confidence story, but told differently through his arrogance.
Spike's actions in Princess Spike are believable and even expected. The last time we had an episode focused on him, he received what may be the most potent moral in the show, telling him that all he needs to do is have confidence in himself. This whole time, he was being held back by his lack of self-confidence, and we see the opposite side of this problem in Princess Spike. Now that he has confidence in himself, we quickly see that turn to overconfidence, biting off far more than he can chew. Yes, he made some unwise decisions, but who wouldn't after being told that they were capable of more than they had thought? Spike is now trying to discover where his true limits are now that his internal struggles with his lack of confidence have been solved. He won't know what he is and isn't capable of until he finds out for himself.
In all honesty, I don't have that big of an issue with Spike's decisions. It could have been a lot worse, and the episode even admits to that when Cadence steps in. I also would like to add that Cadence's character was much better represented. I haven't thought about Cadence before, but she showed a side that actually intrigued me. Instead of labeling her as the sweet-talking character, her suspicions add something different out of the ordinary. She addresses that it's a big responsibility, which is what I admired the show's message about when you're in higher authority than what most stereotype marketing tropes have labeled the princess title as. Predictably though, everything backfires as the waterline runs out of control from the dragon sneezing trees that damage it, thanks to a few polo players, as the palace gets flooded. And as if matters couldn't get any worse, the friendship statue was ruined by the trees. Okay, the trees that makes dragons sneeze? I don't know why there's such a thing. By then, everyone gets upset blaming Twilight for Spike's doings.
How could you let a water main burst on Canterlot's most important day?
Hey, don't look at me! Princess Twilight said to stop working on it!
Because she needed sleep.
Well, what about these trees? I ordered them trimmed to avoid just such a situation.
Well, the princess told me to stop, bub.
Why would the princess make such horrible decisions? This all could have been prevented.
Again, Twilight needed a rest. The saw and the jackhammer were too loud, and I'm pretty sure that Spike would have told them that had he had the real chance so that you would all understand.
You're telling me that she's asleep?
Okay, you know what? I was going to criticize Spike's attempts to run from this problem, but dude, for saying that, fuck Fuck you! In fact, to the entire crowd who got on Spike's shoulders because of demanding higher authority, is this how you thank someone who spent 3 days straight with no sleep, preparing the summit for all of you when she needed a rest afterwards? You should be ashamed of yourselves for not properly respecting what she needs on behalf of yours. You all should be grateful for being united in the first place. If it wasn't for Twilight, you wouldn't have had your vendor halls and your conference rooms. I'm actually surprised that Cadence didn't even pick up on that, rather pick up on Spike's doings. If someone does something for you, especially something grand like a convention, you all should be thankful of what they provided afterwards with their hard efforts. And to be honest, it's exhausting to work with conventions with or without being an attendee. So yeah, Twilight is asleep. You've got a fucking problem with that?
Boy, you sure had to let that out, didn't you?
Yeah, I know I shouldn't be getting carried away like that, especially during last season, but a lot of hard effort comes respect, and they didn't show it. I know about what I did back in Season 4, but I'm at least grateful that we have good episodes like Pinkie Pride, Mod Pie, and Flight to the Finish. This is why I don't have that big of an issue with Spike compared to everyone else. If they had showed some courtesy of knowing Twilight needed a rest, none of this mess would have happened. But you know what? There is something that barely makes up for it. After Spike confesses his wrongdoings and intends to rebuild the friendship statue, everyone pitches in. I've heard some people complain about Spike not getting his comeuppance because of what he did in the episode, but I've already ranted about everyone else's wrongdoings. If Spike had already told them that Twilight was sleeping, it wouldn't have made a difference. He didn't have a choice. And I'm sure that telling Cadence would have sufficed it, but again, he was pressured by the two delegates within short time.
A major complaint I've heard about this episode is its predictability. I won't deny it, everything fell apart and everyone saw it coming. But if you ask me, this actually helps the episode. Everyone saw it coming. Everyone except Spike. This just solidifies Spike's overconfidence. He was so overconfident that he completely failed to see what could go wrong because he didn't think anything could. He was blinded by the idea that he was capable of anything, which was an unintended result of Equestria games. The moral for this episode helped that greatly, telling him to take pride in the position he has and to embrace his own abilities because they are just as important as everyone else's. This is what several other Spike episodes were lacking. There is actually a solid lesson learned, not just a metaphorical slap on the wrist. He gained something that he can take with him rather than just having this episode be another step in his trial and error process.
This is a good food for thought. While I don't have that much to think about in regards to Spike's character, I do believe that he still deserves to be treated better than play him off as a punching bag. I haven't seen that happen too often this season so far. Let's hope we keep it that way. Personally though, I thought Princess Spike was okay. As Caps addressed, it had a good moral about taking pride and having a higher authority and not abuse it. It did have a few repetitive cliches, but technically there are some applicable. My only issue with the episode were the delegates and the attitudes of the summit, due to how disrespectful they were. Caps, I would like to say thank you for your insight and what you have provided for Spike. Hopefully a lot of us will have a more open mind for his character and not immediately judge any future episodes he gets. Or I could just underestimate the public with the backlash and feedback. Well, until next time, I'm GoldenFox.
And I'm Capslock.
And I'll catch you next time. He say, I know you. You know me. One thing I can tell you is you've got to be free. Come together right now. Over me. Oh shit! How come nobody told me we were on the air? Fuck! How do I look? Okay. Greetings, every pony. I am GoldenFox, and this is... What episode am I reviewing? What? Ew! Who names an episode like that? I don't think I've stumbled upon an episode this scatterbrained in my feelings before. There have been episodes that were divided and I would often pick sides, but Party Poop had me tugged on both ends by acknowledging the faults and at the same time admiring what the episode still offers. I'm heavily optimistic on it, but at the same time there's a few crucial problems that are overwhelming over my shoulders. To put it short, I really like this episode, but I'm not sure if I should because a good chunk of it is admittedly a mess. This is a similar result to what my feelings were on bats, except I was just more delusional in my optimism while ignoring its actual faults. I'm probably not making sense here, but I'm getting too ahead of myself here. Let's start from the top. We begin with Twilight trying to impress Celestia by inviting yaks to Equestria in order to acquaint with them after a long period of time. The yaks arrive dressed up as Vikings from the Middle East. Makes sense, as Twilight prepares a dish based on the yak culture. And things easily backfire.
This no tastes like yak food! Fake pony food make yaks mad!
Okay, this is my first major problem. They act like this whenever something isn't met to their satisfaction, and even worse, they expect perfection. The way they talk also doesn't help, as they talk like the Hulk. The main six try to do whatever they can to please the yaks, and they become total destructive assholes. Literally destructive. This repeats itself over and over and over again throughout the entire episode. After everything the main six try to do to satisfy them, they get no respect. Jeez, it's no wonder why the ponies weren't so well acquainted with them for a long time. They act too ungrateful and they behave so close-mindedly, and just to add insult to injury, the yaks declared war because of their lack of satisfaction. Not only was that annoying, it was downright uncomfortable and just mean-spirited. You guys were guests, and you threw a temper tantrum every time they offered you something. Is that how you thank them? And because of how ruthless they are, this puts an endless amount of pressure on Pinkie as she is assigned to put them on a tour through Ponyville. You can already guess what happens by then, so no need to repeat myself there. After a meeting, Pinkie is reminded that she has a party to set up. Judging by their behavior, she's not sure on what to make of, since it could result in making matters worse. Pinkie, I can't blame you. Thinking over the situation to Sugar Cube Corner, Pinkie decides that she might make the party work with what's actually true yak material. In doing so, she decides to take on an adventure to Yak-Yakistan. However, after all the efforts Pinkie's made to reach Yak-Yakistan, we get a joke where she's thrown all the way back to Ponyville by a sled, thus making the journey completely pointless. This is my second major problem. The episode's plot has an identity crisis. Arguably, we have the main six trying to please the yaks, but while that's one conflict, Pinkie's journey to reaching the Yak-Yakistan and then being launched back takes a huge chunk of the episode, making the turmoil of the yaks not being as nearly focused in the middle half. As a result, the episode has either pacing issues or the focus is too cluttered. I normally would get frustrated with this, especially when you compare the structure of this episode to some pony to watch over me. However, unlike this episode, this has a somewhat payoff to the madness of the story. Ending it on a somewhat good note, Pinkie decides to throw a party that isn't yak related this time, and everything goes well.
Prince Rutherford, every time we tried to make something in Equestria feel like Yak-Yakistan, we couldn't get it right. When I got back from my adventure, I realized something. We shouldn't try to make Equestria feel like your home. We should try to make you feel at home in Equestria. And that means showing you why we love it here, so you'll love it too.
The yaks are pleased and decide to not declare war anymore. One of the important aspects of travelers is that they like to see what others hold. And this whole time, Twilight was trying too hard to resemble their culture. It's good to know that you should respect other cultures, but it's also good to show them your own culture. And I think that's a good message. That's somewhat of a good payoff in terms of its moral, but that doesn't excuse what the yaks did. Despite being happy at the very end of the episode, they get no punishment for property damage, screaming violently, disrespecting everything the main six did for them nicely, and was given war as a thanks. So for a while now, I talked about what I didn't like, but as I said, I admired what the episode does provide. What is it that makes me enjoy this episode partially? Pinkie Pie and her travels. While her characterization doesn't level up with Pinkie Pride, she has some of the best traits so far. In fact, she has shown a great altitude of her character this season, but that's beyond the point. Despite not going anywhere in the story, her journey alone would have made a great episode. It's hilarious to watch, providing some great humor that fits the tone perfectly. The random sheep in the middle of Dodge City, getting saved by the Wonderbolts from the fall of a ravine, and the reference to the Beatles. The fucking Beatles. How can you go wrong with that? On top of everything else, anyone Pinkie has met is a whole lot nicer in contrast to... yeah, you all get it at this point. In addition, we see the main six in Pinkie's home where she has a secret room of people's files and preparations for future parties.
Pinkie Pie has a secret party planning cave? How cool is this?
It's notes for the party she wants to throw for her folks' 50th anniversary. But they ain't nearly that old. Huh, she's already planning their 100th too. And their 500th?
I
had no idea she worked so hard on her parties.
I felt unsettled at first when she had records of what people liked, but when narrowing everything down, it's what brings her character and how passionate she is at party planning. Even at almost 500 years of parties planned out for one person, that's kind of tragic and yet touching. Pinkie is someone to make someone smile, and she's more than willing to do everything she can to do so. This scene puts more weight on that. Also, she's one able to defy logic of gravity. I enjoyed this episode, but as I said, my feelings are scrambled. The pacing, the focus, and the plot is a mess, and the yaks were intolerable, and we have a fun yet pointless journey that's fun to watch and showing some of the best of Pinkie's betrayal. When you narrow everything down, the episode itself is divisive more than what the audience depends. I wish this episode was handled a lot better in some areas, but as it is, Party Pooped is a jumbled yet enjoyable episode for me.
I'm sorry I skipped your party.
Oh please, books that are alive, in the magical land of Equestria. Who would freak out like that at this point?
Hello!
Ah, what the shit? Am I seriously talking to a sketch?
Why do they always freak out like that?
Well, it's not very often that I see a book alive.
I found that offensive.
Offensive? How so? Oh, wait. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come off like that.
I'm just messing with you. What brings you to this book?
Oh, well, I was just looking up the values of what other methods there are for brainstorming and critiquing, as I'm finding more to say about Amending Fences. The episode was great, but I had so little to say about it.
So little? How come?
Well, it's a personal episode on what happened to the character, and there's nice callbacks that play a huge role. But that's all I have to say about it. It doesn't come off convincing enough to me.
I related with Twilight and her friends immensely. When I began college, my friends sort of fell off the face of the planet, and let's be honest, so did I. I had begun making efforts to reconnect with them, sort of like Twilight did, but I also felt a deep connection to Moondancer from the same situation that she was in, so this episode was sort of personal to me.
Well then, by all means, how about we talk about it together?
Well, you got the technicals, I got the impact, why not?
Perfect. Greetings to you all, I am GoldenFox.
And my name is Doodle Dabble, and I'm a doodle.
Let's not beat around the bush. This episode was very well done. It was a huge impact on a lot of us, as the majority of the fandom was not only able to relate to it, but also how well presented the scenarios are in general. Ever since then, people have favored this episode quite well, and it's not hard to see why.
I know this episode will rank high on both my enjoyability and appreciation scale. It was funny, it was relatable, it had the analyst singing praise of its continuity, and the characterization was impeccable. It's easy to see why it's so beloved by the fandom.
Twilight discovers her previous time being in Ponyville when she realizes that she didn't think too much about her old friends in Canterlot, so she decides to stroll there to reunite with them and settle her regrets. They are Minuet, Lemonhearts, and Twinkleshine. Easily, however, they forgive Twilight. With one last friend left comes Moondancer. Right from the start, we're given a call back all the way to the pilot episode. It explores on what Twilight used to do before united with the main six we all knew of. This alone makes the episode exciting as it explores Twilight's character more and we see who else she used to be with.
The reasoning of why they didn't hold it against her was disheartening to Twilight, and a bit to myself as well. They just shrugged and said, it was you, we weren't really expecting too much. Colgate was immediately brimming with excitement as the Princess of Friendship was refriending her. A little off-putting, but to be honest, I had to contain my excitement when my friend that went off to be an international model decided he wanted to reconnect with everyone.
Well, that's one way to look at it. By the way, did you say Colgate? Her name is Minuet.
You mean Colgate?
Minuet.
What kind of musician would have an hourglass as their cutie mark?
Musician? What are you talking about?
Minuet, a musical term. A slow, stately ballroom dance for two in triple time, popular especially in the 18th century. A piece of music in triple time in the style of a minuet. You've seen The Music Man, right?
No, all I know is that it influenced Flim and Flam's song from an episode I don't want to talk about.
Oh, don't worry about that. They're special talents ripping things off. The Music Man's a classic musical, and there's a piece in there called the Minuet in G that the kids are taught to play. It's a musical term.
That's beyond irrelevant. Just That's what her name is.
Okay, fine. Then maybe her cutie mark is because she steps in time. Anyways, the one person who can't seem to forgive her so quickly is Moondancer.
As mentioned in the pilot episode, Twilight was invited to her party. As obvious, she couldn't attend. Since then, it's left a rather slow impact on her, and Twilight begins to put the pieces together. Fascinated on how far the show has gone as it makes its comeback to what started. But I digress. Part of what hurts Twilight is that she was a very close friend of Moondancer, making it rather hard for her to make up for the mistake of not coming to the party when it was important to her.
It's an understandable reaction. In high school and middle school, I felt abandoned when I'd find out my friends' weekend plans by their Facebook photos on Monday. Her feelings especially made sense when you add in the explanation she gave at the end of the episode of why it was so important to her for Twilight to come. This, however, was not evident to Twilight. Twilight had different priorities that day. Until she finds this out, though, Twilight is determined to make it up to her.
In doing so, she makes her some deals, one of which was teaching the Haycops method, then gaining access to the library with the condition of hanging out with her friends.
Oh, if you ask me, it's already quite the deal. I jumped out of my seat when I saw Twilight doodled in that textbook. She's another pony that knows Haycart's method, and soon another! It's not very common among the ponies of Canterlot, but it's my favorite technique, as you can probably tell. Eventually I'll make a video of my backstory, but long story short, this is my area of expertise.
Sadly, though, nothing works, and it hurts Twilight as she envisions more about how much of an impact Moondancer has had. However, she gets an idea. With the inclusion of Pinkie Pie, a new party is set up for Dancer as she is led by a trail of books. Are you sure those books aren't going to be stolen? Hell, for that matter, I thought Moon would be smarter than to follow that trail. Anyway, as she arrives, what follows is one of the most emotionally well-presented scenes in the episode.
That was only the first time I ever put myself out there, and then you didn't even bother to show up! Then you left town without saying goodbye, even though we were supposed to be friends. I was humiliated. I felt like I wasn't important. I never wanted to let myself be hurt like that again. Those three finally convinced me that I had value, that other ponies might like me and want to be my friend, and you didn't show up!
Now here is the pinnacle of the episode. There are several of us who have had monologues like this before, whether it be us trying to express how difficult it was for us to stand out and be sociable, or if we're just trying to explain that we felt behind by our friends. And yet many of us have even been on Twilight's end, not even realizing what we did or what we didn't do, and how it hurt them so deeply.
While many can relate to Twilight's end, I can relate to Moondancer's end to some degree. I've been through some scenarios that have impacted me to the point of changing myself, some of which were minimal and others I felt were brutal, or lack thereof. I won't go over my personal experience, but I will point out that some people's troubles can eventually tear them down and change them for the worst, just like what happened to Moondancer. She was enjoying her time with Twilight until she was no longer around. Since then, it changed her. I guarantee you a lot can identify with what Moondancer has been through. But the icing on the cake is what we learn from this kind of event, and that is to not dwell too heavily on what it is, or make it the reason for you to change who you are. That is of course dependable on the many kinds of occasions, but nevertheless, it's something to think about when you come to your past experiences.
And I was beginning to wonder if they would cover the idea of how directions in which life takes us can affect with whom we have our relationships. For a majority of the episode, this moral was what I thought the episode was aiming to teach, but it's not entitled Amending Fences for no reason. I think the moral that it teaches is an important one to learn even still, that, like you said, it's important not to let an experience change who you are. Further, I'd like to add that Twilight learns that we can offend people without even realizing how deeply we did, and that even still it's important for the realization of it to respond to that.
Now, don't take this the wrong way. Experiences are a thing that helps you grow in life, including hard experiences, but there are better ways of learning from them and taking them into account. It's human nature to make mistakes, even if there are ones that can unintentionally offend and hurt others, but you shouldn't dwell too much on them. Rather, learn from them. It's a bit repetitive of me at this point, but the message can be taken wrongly. This episode doesn't show it wrongly though, and I heavily appreciate that. In conclusion, this episode is one hell of an emotional roller coaster as it's a personal side. Everyone can connect with it. It's a bit slow in some parts, but it doesn't take away the experience. It's enjoyable, well relatable, gives us and utilizes its callbacks along with one aspect I'm curious of. Since Twilight has had her connections with her prior friends, it's just a question of when if we'll see them again or not.
The animation was great, had the animator's usual gems of creativity and the expressions and background characters, including Twilight's foil cameo, which I think would be fun to be referenced in the season finale. The script writing is everything we all love from MLP, that intersection between quality and relatability. It resonated with the audience, including myself, for many reasons.
So, are you gonna chill here?
Not for too much longer. There's too many topics to cover to stay in one book for too long, but maybe I'll catch you around on another book.
Well, until next time, this is GoldenFox.
And I'm Doodle Dabble. Hope to see you around my sketchbook soon.